Instead, I want to start by previewing the Clasico. Real Madrid favourites, Don. Is that fair, despite the fact they trail Barcelona in La Liga?
Probably because it's at the Bernabeu. Probably you'd lean towards Real Madrid, but they've got their problems. I mean, I worked on the Dortmund game in the Champions League a couple of weeks back, a couple of days back, and they were all over the place for 45 minutes. There's problems there. I think it's just finding the balance. I think Carlo Ancelotti's trying to find that balance. And I was wondering today how he might solve it and how he might go about it. Well, obviously, he hasn't really got a recognised number 9. If you remember last year, Hutchison came in for a couple of games, doesn't he, as a recognised number 9 and scored 1 or 2 goals. And it took me back to managers playing like flair players on paper. And when you jot the names down on paper, you go, that is amazing. And it took me back to a World Cup, 2 or 3 World Cups ago. And I remember France playing their opening game against Australia. And Mbappe led the line. Griezmann was playing alongside him. And Dembele was playing alongside him. And all the midfield players, the Kantés, Pogbas, etc. But the front 3 on paper looked amazing. And they were awful in that game because it looks good. And you go, rotation, they can do what they want. They're good players. And it never worked. And then match day 2, Olivier Giroud come in as a static number 9 and stood there. And all of a sudden, France started playing off them. And they went on and won the World Cup. So I think similar problems for Ancelotti is finding the balance in the middle of the midfield and also trying to do something. And maybe, I don't think Endrick will start, but maybe starting to blood him as a sort of recognised number 9 for that sort of focal point.
The big question in Spain this week, LME, after the game against Celta, I was lucky enough to commentate on that last week, and they won. They weren't great, but they won. But Bellingham got 1 star in Marca. Now, they've kind of picked on him, and I think totally unfairly, because he's been asked to play a totally different role. He's more like a kind of Makelele, getting forward, supporting, helping, and basically, while the front 3 or the front 2 do their thing, Bellingham's having to be all around to make sure there's no space when they lose the ball. So where do you think they'll fit Bellingham into this side, Carlo Ancelotti, to face Barcelona?
Well, just regarding what you were just talking about, Jude Bellingham, and also based off Don's points, this is something that we continuously talk about. We talk about Mbappe's arrival and all these things, but Toni Kroos's absence is magnanimous in this Real Madrid side, and it's showing, right? So when we talk about Jude Bellingham, who, by the way, has not scored for the club since May, right? It's now having to deal with more responsibilities, as you mentioned. It's not a shocker to me that at this point, I actually see Fede Valverde as Real Madrid's man of the season so far, because he's also doing a lot. But because, now here's the caveat here, because El Clasico is coming with significant injuries that we'll talk about in a second, and it's answering your question here, MD. When Rodrigo comes out of this, which he is, he's not available for this game. I think that actually, by default, allows Carlo Ancelotti to push Jude Bellingham more up. And I think that what you'll see is Mbappe on one side, Vini Jr. on the other one, with Jude Bellingham as this sort of, a hybrid central figure with Camavinga and Tchouaméni possibly in the midfield with Valverde. So that allows Jude Bellingham to kind of do more of what he's used to, of more is what he wants to do, which is, penetrate the box, be a nuisance, be creative, and allow Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. to come from the width, which they like to do, and attack. I see that happening. But make no mistake about it. Real Madrid, as you mentioned in that Celta Vigo game, and yes, they won, they got a good victory against Borussia Dortmund, but Real Madrid at this point are relying so much, as always, on individual brilliance, Vinicius Jr. being the latest one, as opposed to a collective unit. Now, if there's a manager in this planet that's not worried about things like that, it's Carlo Ancelotti. But guess what? Barcelona, under Hansi Flick, are one collective unit. So this is going to be a super interesting Clasico because of those issues. But all the way concluding to Jude Bellingham, because of Rodrigo's absence, I see him pushing more centrally and up front.
Don, if you're Barcelona, and you know that Vinny and Mbappe don't really press, it's a bit like when you played, right? Craig Brown played you as a kind of striker, at times a false nine for Scotland, because he knew you'd get work rate. And the defending starts from the front. But if it's not starting from the front, as far as Real Madrid are concerned, if Vinny's not tracking back, if Bellingham's all over the place, but if Mbappe's not tracking back, what can Barcelona do to exploit what Real Madrid are not doing?
They'll do exactly what they've done against Bayern Munich midweek. And they tore Bayern Munich apart. They were outstanding. I mean, Yamal, we've talked about him for such a young player. He's got such a wise head. Rafinha got a hat-trick in the game. Lewandowski was outstanding leading the line. So if Real Madrid think, well, we can go into this game with players just attacking and not doing the defensive work, they'll be in for a hard game, because the buy-in game proved for Barca, and it was 4-1, but it was going on sort of 7 or 8 because their high-line buy-in was just incredible, and Barca picked them off, and Rafinha had a great night. The middle of the park was outstanding. The work rate, I like the way Hansi Flick is starting to blood 1 or 2 youngsters. They played really well. They dominated the game. They're aggressive. So we always talk about boxing where you say stars make fights. This is a brilliant matchup between 2 fantastic sides, but the stylistically are completely different. So I think it's really fascinating when we touch on Mbappe as well. He's gone to Real Madrid thinking, I'm going to be the man. He is nowhere near the man. Vinny's the man. So how that dynamic is going to work going forward, and the positions that Kylian Mbappe's got to start learning or picking up. But to LME's point, I think he nailed it with Camavinga or Tchouaméni. I think now Carlo Ancelotti has got to start training one of those 2 young players to be a holding midfield player and make one of them out the 2 of them really, really disciplined. Because if they're not, and as I said, they all bomb forward, Barca will pick them off big time.
Does the Real Madrid midfield lack the quality to play out LME? They're ball winners, but they're not the best passers in the world. Is that an issue? Is that something Barca can exploit?
Yeah, I mean, Guti said it himself, the Real Madrid legend, and I totally agree with him. The issue that we have right now, and I'm sorry to sound like a broken clock here, but Toni Kroos's absence is really big here, because he was so good at literally doing exactly what you're talking about, identifying the passes. There's a detachment right now with Real Madrid. Yes, Real Madrid fans will say to me, look, we're undefeated in La Liga. We just destroyed Borussia Dortmund, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, granted. But guess what? When I'm looking at your schedule so far, right, I actually have not been that impressed, right? Atletico Madrid, you tied 1-0. You lost to Lille in the Champions League. And so you've gone away from some victories because of your individual brilliance. And the midfield, Andy, that you're talking about right now is more of a workforce as opposed to the complete opposite of what Barcelona are about, right? Don was talking about the youngins, players like Marc Casador, who is playing out of his mind right now. This is a united, collected, well-rounded Barcelona midfield. That, by the way, the great thing about Hansi Flick, and it's kind of the answering to the Real Madrid because they're the complete opposite. The great thing about Hansi Flick, what he's done, is he's made them so fit and so disciplined that they're not actually interested in what they do with the ball as opposed to what they do when they don't have it. The moment they recuperate that ball, and you saw it against Bayern Munich, the moment they recuperate that ball, boom, they come at you. Casador gets the ball, he looks out on the left side, and there's Rafinha, who's playing out of his absolutely individual mind. No attacker in major European leagues has created more chances than the Brazilian, right? And this midfield of Barcelona picks you up. Real Madrid don't have that right now. Toni Kroos used to do that. So they have to find a way, just like Don said, they have to find a way to hold steady, to have some kind of anchor, but at the same time, keep the chains moving. Because right now, you have Vinicius Jr., who's just wonderful, Mbappe, who's wonderful, Jude Bellingham, but they're not getting that reception. There's a real detachment. And that's going to be a problem in El Clasico. Yes, it's Real Madrid, but I'm really interested to see what Carlo Ancelotti is going to plan out in that midfield.
Bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre because when you look at Real Madrid compared to, as you said, Casado and Pedri in midfield, who are very, very young and brilliant young players and fit and energetic. Then you go to the Real Madrid midfield and you go Bellingham, Valverde, Modric, and you go, there should be enough knowledge there. Even though, Jude Bellingham's, he's played a lot of games, not so much for Real Madrid, obviously, because he's just been there 5 minutes, but in terms of the body of work that he's done over the last 5 years, there's enough knowledge there to problem solve.
Yeah.
But they're just so, I mean, it's good in a way because Dortmund battered them at 45 minutes, which is obviously bad, but it's great in a way that you can still lean on 5 goals in the second half. It's still great that you've got these attacking players in moments that can turn it on for Real Madrid. And in moments, I think we've seen over the last 2 or 3 Champions Leagues that they've won, they've done it on moments. I can remember PSG had them beat, Chelsea had them beat, Man City had them beat, and they went on and won the Champions League. So they're not used to not having the ball and getting the job done and finding a way. But this is going to be really fascinating when they're playing against 2 youngsters. You would imagine everything about the knowledge that I've picked up over the years. Experience normally wins. I'm not so sure in this game.
Yeah, and by the way, MD and Don, just real quickly, talking about like how Borussia Dortmund controlling some of the games, some other games we've seen it last season, Real Madrid got the double over Barcelona. But guess what? Barcelona were the better team in both of those matches.
Yeah,
but it didn't
Bellingham.
matter because of individual brilliance. I'm just not so sure that's going to happen this Saturday. It's going to be really interesting.
It's a very tough one to predict. I remember being at the Clasico a couple of years ago. It was the first one. It was about this time of year when we had España week. And Real Madrid won by 3-1. So comfortable. And you thought there's just such a gulf in class right now between Real Madrid and Barcelona. Barca won the title that year. Now, in the summer, Dawn, you kind of thought Real Madrid, fresh off the victory over Borussia Dortmund at Wembley, 15th Champions League, absolutely flying, another La Liga title. Barcelona, new coach, Hansi Flick, I mean, they'll be lucky to get within an arm's length. But Barca go into this one 3 points clear. LME's come up with 1 or 2 ways that he thinks Barcelona have improved and impressed this year. What has Hansi Flick done overall that has got them in the position that they're in?
I think he's changed the mindset of the players, and he's also, I think, changed the mindset of the fans. I think over the years, Barca with Pep and Xavi have been used to a certain style of play, and it's sort of right into their DNA. If you watch Barcelona, you close your eyes and you think of Barcelona, you think of Cruyff and you think of Pep and you think of Xavi and you think of all the ball playing, like the Busquets and the Iniestas, all these guys who Messi's who was just ridiculously good. And it was the style that was beating everyone up. I think about sort of 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that was starting to disappear a little bit. It was all the stories off the pitch, the financial trouble that Barca were in when they were, like, I say, registering players, but they couldn't actually play, which was bizarre. And then it was really fascinating to see them go for sort of free transfers, like guys that didn't cost too much. People like Christensen coming from Chelsea. Alonso came in a few years back as well. And then you just thought, I'm not sure where this Barcelona club, not so much the team, are going. And then I think it took Hansi Flick to come in with this sort of German mindset of going, no. We might have to sacrifice a little bit of what the fans sort of were used to in terms of dominating and sexy football and brilliant football and just, you know, the tricks and the tempo that they played at and how cool they were and how fluid they were. And Hansi Flick's come in and go, well, I'll sacrifice a little bit of that for winning football. And that's what you have to do sometimes. Sometimes you can't just play just because it's in that DNA and you want to play it and you'd love to play it. Maybe you haven't got the players to do it. So he's sacrificing a little bit of the sort of philosophy from Barca, but he's doing it his way, and a little bit of sort of German along the way, which they're hard to beat, which is the most important thing. If you're hard to beat and you're winning games, that's better than any method of any philosophy that you might have as a coach.
2.5 years since Barca last won at the Bernabeu in La Liga. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang got a couple of goals. I think right now they would take a point if offered it right now, LME. What do you think about that? And also, Gavi came back after 11 months out in midweek. You're not starting him, are you? But you might need to bring him off the bench, and you'd have him available for selection, but would you start him?
No, I think Hansi Flick is going to be very careful about how to introduce Gavi in a game of such magnitude. I mean, Gavi, we know how wonderful he is, but he has gone through so much from an injury perspective. I think it's important to balance what he can do. And actually, it could be a plus for Hansi Flick to add that kind of player later in a game, depending on how the rhythm of it is going. But to answer your question regarding, would Barcelona settle with a point? I know we're not doing predictions yet, and I'm not going to give you fully right now, but I'm telling you something. I am incredibly impressed with this Barcelona side. They are, by average, the youngest team in La Liga, one of the youngest by average teams in the world, 24. If it wasn't for Theo, the old uncle Lewandowski, that number would be even lower. They are playing with this discipline, and Don was talking about it, thanks to Hansi Flick, about what you do when you don't have the ball. They have like 6 or 7 graduates from La Masia starting the game, right? Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí is what an unbelievable center back. So that and all of that culminates, Rafinha, Lewandowski, all that culminates to me that at this point right now, I am seeing a Barcelona with an identity, with a clear, strong, confident identity. And yes, sometimes we need to just rip up the notebook when it comes to El Clasico, because it's a game of such dramatic importance that it doesn't really matter what you say in terms of analysis. You just have to see what the two teams do. But I am so much more confident in what Barcelona do right now as opposed to what Real Madrid are doing, regardless of the fact that it's at Bernabeu. I believe in them that much right now. I may have jinxed them, but I think that at this point, Barcelona are showing so much off the ball, with the squad, whoever comes on. Oh, and by the way, they have Lamine Yamal.
Who wins, LME?
I think Barcelona win this.
Prediction?
I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. It could be one of the most entertaining Clásicos we have seen in a decade, and I think it's going to be something like 3-2 Barcelona.
Oof, wow. Don?
I've got like a little monkey on there telling me it's Barca, and another one there saying moments Real Madrid, and I just think the Real Madrid boys, when they need a result, when Bellingham needs a goal, when Mbappe needs a performance with Vinny, I think they get the job done at home 2-1.
Yeah, MD, just very quickly that we haven't discussed, and I'll be very quick. Thibaut Courtois is out. Dani Carvajal is out. Rodrigo is out. Toni Kroos is not playing there anymore. These are key injuries for Real Madrid. And yes, I hear Don, this is Real Madrid. They just show up when they show up. But those are key absences, and I'm going to be very intrigued to see how they perform against a very confident Barcelona.
And Barca getting so many players back. I'm going to go for a Desmond. What's a Desmond, Don?
2-2.
Exactly. I knew that
too. So we've got everything covered. We've got a Barca win, we've got a draw, and we've got a Real
One of us are going to be right.
Exactly.
There's a genius somewhere on this panel.
We shall revisit that next week on ESPN FC Live.